Hi guys, sorry to interrupt your viewing, but please subscribe to the channel and like this video. Thank you.
The night he shattered me didn't start with screams or slammed doors or that thick silence couples weaponize like a second language. It started with wine. Laughter. A long wooden table dressed in white linen, centered beneath string lights and climbing ivy, at a boutique vineyard just outside of Santa Rosa. A place we'd once visited on a whim during our second year of marriage, back when we were still in that phase of whispering secrets in public like kids hiding from the world. He remembered that trip, of course he did, and booked it again to celebrate our 9th anniversary, as if sentiment was something you could schedule. David wore the navy blazer I always loved, the one that made his eyes seem like they were built from ocean water and secrets. He touched my lower back when guiding me through the crowd, the same way he had since our first date. He gave a few hugs, kissed a couple of cheeks, clinked glasses with his old boss, told a joke that made my cousin Laura snort wine through her nose. From the outside, we looked golden, those kind of people others envy, the ones who seem to have figured out the secret recipe for stability, intimacy, and sex that doesn't dry up with the laundry. By the time the 5th course was cleared, some kind of wild mushroom risotto with truffle oil and pretentious plating, I was 3 glasses of wine deep, just enough to feel warm but not stupid. David stood. He raised his glass, commanding the attention of both tables like he always did. Born for the stage, even if it was a vineyard patio with overhead heaters and no microphones. To my wife, he said, pausing for effect, already grinning like he'd thought this out. 9 years. Almost a decade of dinners, dog hair, burnt pancakes, and forgetting our anniversary at least twice. Laughter. Good laughter. Familiar. Then he pivoted. 9 years, he said again, tilting his glass just slightly toward me, and you still don't know about her. For half a second, the entire world blinked. Time didn't stop, not really, but it stuttered. Just enough for the brain to check itself. Just enough to wonder if maybe he said it wrong, or maybe you heard it wrong, or maybe the wine had settled weird behind your eyes. But he was already laughing. That confident, breezy, offhand kind of laugh he used whenever he made one of his jokes. The ones that were never really jokes. People chuckled. Some awkwardly. My sister narrowed her eyes, like she was trying to decode a crossword puzzle made of red flags. I smiled. Not a big smile. Just enough to keep the air from snapping. I leaned in and kissed his cheek. 9 years, I echoed, taking his glass and filling it again. Guess I'm just a little slow. That was it. The whole moment. 5 seconds long. But the ground had already started to move under my feet. We'd dance later. He twirled me once, maybe twice. I don't even remember the music. I just remember how his hand slid down my waist, warm and sure, like someone who believed he was still completely in control. He whispered that he booked us a room on the property, some suite with a fireplace and clawfoot tub, and I laughed. Because of course he did. That man never did anything halfway. Not love, not lies. Later, when he was passed out in bed, snoring slightly from the bottle and a half of Merlot, I took his phone from the bathroom sink where he'd left it charging. No snooping required. It lit up the moment I picked it up. 1 missed call. A name. Just a letter, really. J. The call history was worse. 21 calls in the past week alone, all incoming, none answered. The most recent one was right before dinner. I didn't call back. I didn't yell or cry or shake him awake demanding answers. I just stared at the name and the timestamp and let the wine settle cold in my stomach. Then I blocked the number. I didn't sleep that night. I lay next to him while he dreamed, wrapped in hotel sheets and his own soft betrayal, and I counted the days since our first kiss. Since our first apartment. Since the time I miscarried quietly in the bathroom and he brought me soup without ever asking how far along I was. I counted all the ways a person can break you with tenderness. The next morning, he brought me coffee and kissed the top of my head like a husband should. I thanked him. I kissed him back. 3 days later, the same number tried to call again. Then again. Then again. Over 100 times. 104, to be exact. I didn't answer. I just sat in the kitchen, watching the screen light up like it was trying to tell me a secret I wasn't ready to hear. Not yet, but I was getting closer. The first voicemail came in at 7:22 in the morning, just as I was pouring the last of the coffee into my chipped mug, the one with the faded quote about love that used to make me smile, but now just felt like a punchline someone forgot to laugh at. I didn't answer the call, and I didn't hesitate either. I let it ring until it dropped, stared at the blinking notification like it might explain something if I looked at it long enough. It didn't, but her voice did. It was the kind of voice you don't forget, not because of how it sounded, but because of how broken it was, like she was holding herself together with the same tape I'd been using for years. She whispered, barely above a breath, the kind of voice used when you're afraid of being overheard even in your own home. "I thought you told her already," she said, her words cracked open and raw. "David, please. I can't keep doing this. I can't keep being the secret." Then silence. Not the peaceful kind. The kind that hums in your ears and makes your skin crawl because it carries all the things no one had the guts to say out loud. I played that voicemail 5 times before I saved it. Then I started a new folder on my desktop, hidden behind a fake tax spreadsheet, and labeled it Home Repairs. I guess in a way that's what I was doing, fixing the place he thought he could quietly destroy. By the end of the second day, I had 9 voicemails. She never used her name. She never screamed. That made it worse. That kind of quiet doesn't come from someone throwing a tantrum. It comes from someone who's been drowning so long, they've stopped thrashing. I knew that sound. I'd made that sound. I just hadn't realized someone else was making it for the same man. When I finally picked up the phone to call Jenna, my best friend since college and the only person who had seen me cry on the bathroom floor after the miscarriage, I didn't know what I expected her to say. But I said it anyway. "I think my husband's had a whole second life for 9 years," I told her, my voice steady, like I was reciting a grocery list. "Milk. Eggs. Betrayal." There was a long pause, the kind that makes your spine itch. Then Jenna let out a breath that sounded like she'd been holding it for years. "I'm gonna ask you one thing," she said finally, "and I want you to answer it honestly." "Okay. Do you want to know the truth? Or do you want to keep pretending you don't already?" That question hit harder than anything David had said. Because she was right. Somewhere deep in the gut I'd ignored for most of my marriage, I already knew. The late-night work calls. The trips that never made sense. The sudden, practiced ease with which he navigated lying. It had all been there. I just never connected the dots because I never wanted to look at the damn picture. I tracked the number. Took me less than an hour. Technology is a wonderful thing when you stop using it to avoid pain and start using it to hunt for it. I paid for a background check, then dug into social media. She didn't have Facebook, but she had an Instagram account under a fake last name and 0 posts. One tagged photo showed her standing next to David at some kind of charity event 3 years ago. She was laughing. His arm was around her waist. I zoomed in until the pixels blurred her face into something unrecognizable. Her name was Sasha. I bought a burner phone that afternoon, paid cash, kept the receipt. I used his tone when I typed out the message, short, abrupt, slightly detached. It read, "Need to talk. Coffee. Same place. No name. No location. No time. Just fate." She replied within 4 minutes. "Tomorrow." I answered 1. And that was it. No questions. No hesitation. That alone told me everything I needed to know. She wasn't new to this. She was used to following his lead, taking whatever crumbs he tossed her and pretending it was a meal. That night, I sat down and opened my journal, the one I hadn't touched since our 7th anniversary, when he bought me a leather-bound edition with gold trim and the words "Write the life you want" embossed on the front. The irony nearly made me choke. I wrote, "We were married for 10 years. 10 years of my life wrapped around his, like ivy on brick." I never saw the cracks beneath. I stopped, looked at the date, counted again. 9 years. Not 10. I left it. Let the error sit there like a wound I didn't want to close. The next day, I wore a gray sweater and no makeup. I wanted her to see me. Really see me. Not the wife in his stories. Not the woman who screamed or drank or slammed doors like I imagined he had painted me. I wanted to sit across from her and know once and for all how much of my life had been stolen by a woman who might have also been a victim. The cafe was on the corner of Elm and 17th. Brick walls. Old wood floors. Smelled like cinnamon and regret. I walked in and scanned the room. Then I saw her. She was sitting in the back corner, facing the window, her hands wrapped around a mug too big for her fingers. Her belly round, tight, unmistakable, pressed against the edge of the table. Sasha was 8 months pregnant. And I was ready to ask every question I had spent 9 years swallowing. She looked too young to be carrying the kind of pain, but it was there, smeared across her face like a bad night's sleep she hadn't had time to wash off. Sasha wore her exhaustion like makeup, applied in streaks of dark under her eyes, and the kind of posture that told me she was waiting for someone who never showed. She didn't look up when I slid into the chair across from her. She just clutched her mug tighter, knuckles white, breath shallow, and whispered, "He said you wouldn't come." I didn't blink. I didn't correct her. I didn't even pretend to know what the hell that meant. I just nodded like I knew things I didn't and said, "Well, here I am." She finally looked at me, really looked, and I could see the moment her face tried to map who I was, tried to match my features against the pieces she'd been told. I saw suspicion first, then sadness, then something close to embarrassment. Like she'd been caught mid-dream, but the dream wasn't hers to have. Her hand moved to her belly instinctively, like it was a shield. And I understood then that this girl, because yes, in many ways, she was still a girl, had been fed a fairy tale laced with poison and believed it all the way down to the pit of her stomach. "He said you and he were done years ago," she said, her voice small but direct, like someone repeating a line they'd memorized too many times. "He said you were an alcoholic, that you hit him once during a fight. He told me the divorce was just dragging out because of assets and some messy paperwork." She paused, searching my face for either confirmation or outrage. I gave her neither. I nodded again and asked softly, "How long have you two been involved?" She hesitated, then laughed bitterly. "Since 2017, she said, but I didn't know he was married until 2 years in. And even then, he told me it was basically over. He made it sound like you were some bitter ex who wouldn't let go." 2017. That was the year David and I took our road trip up the Oregon coast, the one he said had changed his perspective, had recentered him after a rough quarter at work. I had chalked his distant behavior during that trip to stress. Now I wondered if he was just missing her, or if he'd snuck away to call her while I slept in motel rooms he'd picked just because they didn't have Wi-Fi. Sasha pulled her phone from her oversized bag and scrolled through a folder marked Us. She turned the screen toward me without hesitation, like she had nothing to hide. Photo after photo. Smiles. Beaches. A ski trip in Tahoe. A 4th of July party in someone's backyard. Then one stopped me cold. It was a picture of David holding a sparkler, Sasha leaning into his shoulder, both of them lit by the fading golden hour light. The date on the photo was July 12th. That was my birthday. That was the year he said he had to work late, that he couldn't get away, but had left a gift on the counter with a note that said, "Rain check, dinner next week." I had spent that birthday eating takeout with Jenna and laughing about how marriage was mostly just rescheduling everything. I didn't know he was celebrating somewhere else. I looked back up at Sasha and smiled the way someone smiles right before their heart caves in on itself. "You two seemed happy." She looked ashamed at that. "We were. I thought we were. But things changed when I got pregnant last year." He started pulling away, told me he wasn't ready again. Her voice cracked. "He said the first baby wasn't even mine. That it wasn't real. but I lost her anyway. He didn't even come to the hospital. I felt something in me twist. You were pregnant before? Yeah, she whispered, eyes focused on the mug again. 2 years ago. I was 7 weeks when I started bleeding. I called him, but he was out of service. I didn't even know where he was. I drove myself to the ER. He didn't check in on me for 3 days. She said that with no trace of expectation, like she'd long stopped hoping he'd show up when it mattered. And that, more than anything, made me want to scream. I cleared my throat, forced my voice steady. Do you really believe he left me back then? She gave a bitter laugh. I did. I wanted to, but then things didn't add up. I kept asking to meet his family, his friends. There was always an excuse. I even asked him once if he was still seeing you, and he said, she knows. We have an arrangement. I blinked. An arrangement? Sasha nodded slowly, like she didn't even know what she believed anymore. He said you were okay with it. That you were one of those modern couples. That you knew he needed something different. That you didn't ask questions. I swallowed hard, but my mouth tasted like rust. And you believed him? She looked up at me then, her eyes dark and haunted. I wanted to, because the truth would mean I was the side piece for 6 years. And that kind of truth makes you hate yourself. I didn't know what to say to that. I didn't know how to tell her that he was capable of creating an entire world of half-truths and casting himself as the victim in every one. I didn't know how to tell her that until 3 days ago. I might have done the same. But I did know one thing. He had told her I knew. He had told her I was okay with it. He had told her we had a fucking arrangement. And suddenly, everything inside me snapped into focus. I smiled again, and it wasn't kind this time. Thank you for meeting me, Sasha. I think it's time I set the record straight. Because the next part of this story wouldn't be quiet. It wouldn't be polite. And it damn sure wouldn't be about forgiveness. By the time I pulled into our driveway that evening, the streetlights had just begun to flicker on, casting that soft orange hue across the cracked concrete and the familiar ivy that curled around our porch columns like it had something to hide. I sat in the car for a minute longer than I needed to, watching the porch light blink on through the motion sensor, like the house was waking up to greet me. I didn't feel angry anymore. Not exactly. The fire had cooled into something sharper, something colder. A steel kind of rage. The kind you can hold in your hands without burning yourself if you're careful. Inside the house, everything looked exactly as it should. His shoes by the door, the smell of his cologne lingering faintly in the hallway, the faint hum of a sports channel playing from the living room. He didn't look up when I came in, just called out casually, "Hey babe. You good?" like nothing in the world had shifted. Like I hadn't just sat across from a woman 8 months pregnant with his child, listening to her explain how I was supposedly the ghost in her relationship. I'm good, I replied, walking into the kitchen and pulling out the salmon he liked best, the one I only made on holidays or anniversaries or nights when I needed to distract him. I poured 2 glasses of white wine. I set the table. I even lit a candle. I didn't say a word about Sasha. I didn't let my voice crack or my hands shake or my eyes betray the war I was already waging in the back of my mind. When he walked in and saw the table set, his brow lifted slightly, and he smiled that half-smile he wore when he thought he'd won something. We sat. We ate. We talked about nothing important, his meetings, the neighbor's new dog, a restaurant that opened downtown that we should try sometime. And then I raised my glass and looked him in the eye. To honesty, I said, my voice as smooth as the wine in my glass. Better 9 years late than never. He blinked just once, and I saw it, just a flicker, but it was there. Something in his brain twitched. A question forming in the space behind his smile. He raised his glass slowly, nodded once, and clinked mine. Honesty, he repeated. That night, while he showered, I opened his laptop. Not with a password. He'd never needed one, he trusted me that much. Or maybe he was just that arrogant. Either way, I had access to everything. I installed a keylogger first, then the surveillance software. I knew better than to confront him before I had a full hand. The kind of hand you play last when everyone thinks the game is over. The next day, I changed the locks on my home office. He noticed, but didn't ask. He was starting to suspect something. I could see it in the way he hesitated before leaving for work, how his hand lingered just a second too long on the doorknob, like he was waiting for a confession that never came. He called Sasha 3 times that night. She didn't answer. She didn't answer because I had sent her everything, screenshots of his emails, the messages where he mocked her tears, where he called her a seasonal habit and referred to the baby as a temporary distraction. He had never cleared his sent folder. Rookie mistake. Sasha replied with one word. Why? I didn't respond. I didn't need to. That word wasn't for me. Later that evening, she called me. This time I answered. Her voice was wrecked, hollow in a way that told me she'd been screaming into pillows for hours. She thanked me. Not out of gratitude, but because she finally knew she wasn't crazy. That she wasn't the one who'd built a fantasy out of nothing. David had led her there, brick by brick. He told me he wanted to leave you, she said through what sounded like tears. He said he just needed time. I said nothing. I let the silence do the bleeding. That night, I sat down with my laptop and typed a list: accounts, assets, passwords, autopays, insurance policies, shared credit cards, subscriptions. Every place our lives touched financially, I untangled. Quietly. Efficiently. I called my lawyer, a sharp woman named Nadine who'd once helped Jenna through her second divorce. I told her I wasn't filing yet, but I needed every thread lined up. No knots. No frayed ends. Then I started erasing myself from the shared parts of our life. He didn't notice at first. Men like David rarely do. They think attention is love, and absence is compliance. The next night, I made him toast again. Not a metaphorical toast this time. Actual toast. Buttered sourdough, his favorite. Served with eggs, over easy, with that annoying sprinkle of paprika he liked. He thanked me, called me perfect. I kissed him on the cheek and smiled like I still believed it. Later, after he left for the gym, I sat on the couch and checked my burner phone. One new message from an unknown number. No name. Just an image. It was Sasha. She looked tired, pale, and far too thin for someone who had given birth days ago. But she was holding a baby. Tiny. Wrapped in a blue blanket with a hospital bracelet still on her wrist. She looked into the camera like she'd made peace with the fact that she would never fully understand the man we both knew. The caption said, "You're his real wife. He should be with you. But he came here last night." I stared at the photo for a long time. Not at Sasha. Not even at the baby. But at David, who I could see in the background, reflected in the mirror behind her. He was shirtless. And smiling. By the time everything started to fall apart, it didn't feel like chaos anymore. It felt like gravity finally doing its job, like every lie David had carefully suspended in midair was crashing back down in the exact order I'd planned. That kind of collapse isn't loud. It doesn't scream. It whispers. It creaks. It sighs through cracks and wires and paper trails until a man who thought he'd built his castle on stone finally realizes it was sand from the beginning. I gave him a 9-year head start and still managed to catch up before he saw me coming. It started on a Thursday night, right in the middle of the company's fall gala, one of those stiff, overpriced charity events where men wear suits they can't breathe in and women walk around pretending they care about the silent auction. David was supposed to be giving a brief speech that evening, something about sustainable design and the future of urban architecture, but instead, he was handed an envelope by a woman in black heels and a firm voice who didn't care that he was mid-sip of champagne. The room didn't react at first. No one ever expects legal service to come wrapped in lipstick and a quiet smile. But when he opened it, I imagine the words leapt out at him like a slap. Divorce papers. Signed, sealed, and already filed with Nadine's eagle-eyed precision. No room left for negotiations. No gray areas. Just the clean, sharp weight of a woman who had finally decided she was done performing forgiveness. While he was still reeling from the sting of legal ambush, a second blow landed with more force than I expected. A quiet tip from me, an anonymous email with just the right attachments, landed in the inbox of the company's compliance officer. A folder titled Expense Anomalies Q3 laid out 5 years of inconsistent reimbursements, duplicated invoices, and a few lavish client dinners that happened to coincide with the weekends he was supposedly in Denver or Boston or anywhere but with Sasha. Turns out, when you build your life on deception, it's easy to forget who's watching. And I had watched. Carefully, quietly, like a woman with nothing better to do than tally every dollar he ever tried to hide. But the real blow? That came from Sasha, and she didn't even realize it. She posted a photo on Instagram at 3 in the morning, sleep-deprived and raw, the kind of post you write when the hormones are still punching holes in your logic and your heart's too full to function. The photo was of David holding the baby, her baby, their baby, and the caption said, "For years of loving him in silence. Now he's mine for good." It didn't take long before someone commented on the timeline, doing the math out loud. Then someone else pointed out that the man in the photo was married to someone else. A slow-moving avalanche began in the comments, dragging their story into the light whether she liked it or not. The internet has no mercy, especially for women who love the wrong man out loud. By Monday morning, David's face was in places it didn't belong: screenshots, HR meetings, angry email chains. His boss called him in. His partners froze his company accounts. He came home to find his key no longer fit the front door. I watched from the window as he jiggled the handle, knocked once, then twice, then pounded hard enough to rattle the frame. I waited until he slumped against the porch railing before opening the door, just far enough for him to see my face, but not enough to step inside. "You were supposed to love me through anything," he said, voice cracking, eyes wet in a way I'd never seen before. "I did," I replied, calm and clear. "That's why this took so long." He didn't have an answer for that. Just stood there, breathing like someone trying to remember how. He left without another word. The next day, Sasha vanished. No calls, no posts, no forwarding address. Her social accounts were wiped clean. The hospital said she was discharged early, against recommendation. The number she had used to text me went dark. The last trace of her was a gas station receipt from 2 towns over, time-stamped just after midnight. I don't know if she ran to escape him, or to protect the baby, or just to find somewhere she could be someone else. I don't blame her either way. We were both broken by the same man in different ways, and maybe the only piece left was distance. I sat alone in the house for days, surrounded by the echo of what had been. The silence wasn't comforting or cruel, it was just there. Constant. Heavy. A reminder that freedom comes with its own cost. It was a week after everything blew up when I finally listened to the last voicemail from Sasha. It had been sitting in my inbox, unread, marked with a date that made my heart twist. 1 week before the toast. Her voice was tired but steady, like she'd rehearsed the words too many times before finally hitting send. "I know you don't know me, but I think you deserve to. I'm not trying to steal your life. I just want mine back." That was it. No threats. No drama. Just a quiet woman trying to untangle herself from a web neither of us chose. I deleted the voicemail, then stared at the wall for a long time, wondering if love, real love, was supposed to feel like this. Like a war you survive, but never really win. Maybe the real betrayal wasn't his. Maybe it was mine for staying too long, loving too deep, and smiling too quietly.